Hello and welcome to day 157. Today we are starting in the book of Ecclesiastes. We'll be covering chapters 1 through 3. We'll look at Psalm 45 and Ephesians chapter 2. So Ecclesiastes is one of what is called the wisdom books. This would be books like Proverbs, Song of Psalms, and Ecclesiastes. Depending on what translation you have, the beginning can be very familiar or it's going to sound different. So probably the most familiar beginning is vanity of vanities, all is vanity. But it can also be translated as meaningless, purposeless, smoke, drifting away, all is smoke. So this is one of those places where the Hebrew doesn't have a really specific translation directly into English, and so different translations have used different approaches to the beginning of Ecclesiastes. So this reminds us that what we are reading in the English is not the original language. If you want the real thing, you need to learn Hebrew. But this is a good moment for us to remember that translation is an art in and of itself, and depending on who's translating and what their priorities are, sometimes the English translations have a different feel to them, and so just keep that in mind. Sometimes it's useful to go to Bible Gateway and read the same passage in different translations to see how different translators have dealt with the original Hebrew in trying to put it into a form of English that is familiar for people in the United States right now. So as we go through Ecclesiastes, it's not a very long book. It'll take just a few days, but it can feel very depressing at times. The writer seems to be very cynical. There is wisdom embedded in this, but sometimes it also seems like we're in a circle of life that is boring and tedious, and what does anything matter? So as we start chapter 1, we see some of this. What is the meaning of life? What is the circle of life? Everything happens over and over and over. This is boring. This is tedious. What is God's plan here? And we don't often get a direct answer from the writer of Ecclesiastes, and we don't know exactly who wrote it. But we do get this sense, especially in the beginning, that life is absurd. At one point it says, is being smart better than stupid? No, everyone ends up in the same place. Everyone's going to die. Life comes to an end, and who's to say how anything is going to happen? Then there's a question. It's supposedly being written by a king, but this could just be a literary convention. What comes after being a successful king? Nothing. All is smoke, and it just blows away. Now, when we get to chapter 3, this is probably the most familiar section of Ecclesiastes because of the success of Pete Seeger's song, Turn, 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 made famous by the Byrds in the 1960s and 70s. In this section, the writer points out that there's a time for everything, a time for life, a time for death, a time for joy, a time for sorrow, a time for many different things, all in a duality, a dichotomy, a back and forth. Eventually, the writer points out that God will be the judge in the end. And there's the question, is life a test from God? Can we know of God's plan? So there are times when the writer's saying makes the most of what you have, because who knows what's going to happen next. We are going to have to keep reading to figure out the purpose of this book, and this is a book that a lot of people find very frustrating and very difficult to get through, even though it's not very long, and even though there are nuggets of wisdom that are very appreciated as you go through. Psalm 45 is a little bit odd today. It's a unique psalm. It's describing a royal wedding, but there are no names, so no one really knows what the wedding is and how this fits in with other things. It does share some royal themes with Psalm 72. So it's a unique psalm, and just read it, enjoy it for what it is. Ephesians 2, Paul is continuing to talk to the new church of believers in Ephesus, in what is today called Turkey. And Paul is talking about how God plucked us from lives of sin and brought us to life in Christ. Saving us was God's idea. This was not our idea. The whole plan that we are living through in Christ is God's idea. And it is God's work to save us. There is nothing we can do to bring salvation to our lives. Our job is to simply say yes to God and accept the gift of salvation that Jesus is offering us. So, one of the things that he really emphasizes here is that Jesus brings people together, both Jewish and non Jewish believers. So, our reflection on this section today is, who does Jesus bring together today? Where is Jesus removing walls that we have put up that separate people? Are there ways that we separate men from women, from older people, from younger people, from citizens, from non citizens, from people of different colors and nationalities and ethnicities, people with different education levels, different physical capabilities? There are so many ways that we as humans divide people and separate people. And Paul is really talking about here that Jesus on the cross brings everyone together. When you think of who was at the foot of the cross, there was John and the women, but there were Roman soldiers, there were criminals on the other crosses, there were townspeople just showing up to see what was going on. The cross brings people together. And so Paul is emphasizing that the Ephesians now belong to Jesus just as Jewish believers belong to Jesus. There's still a sense that the Jewish believers are insiders and they know more, have more access to God than the Gentile or non-Jewish believers who are often considered outsiders. And Paul is trying to break this down. Paul is trying to bring the church into more of a sense of community where everyone is welcome and everyone has a place. Enjoy today as you think about the divisions in your life and the ways that people are separated in your daily routines, and see if there's a way that Jesus is calling you to bridge some of those divisions and find a way to bring more people together. We'll see you next time.